Social media is not the problem, and neither are you. I don't think most people are bad at social media. I think most people are completely exhausted by what social media has become. Over the next 8 episodes, we're going to explore why intelligent, caring, deeply skilled people keep disappearing online and why showing up feels so much harder than it should. Why confidence seems to arrive first and how to build self-trust, expression, and the capacity that allows your work to reach the people it's meant for. Hi, my name is Vivia. I did not come from marketing. I was not someone who found self-promotion natural or someone who wanted to be visible online. I actually started out as an art photographer, and what fascinated me was never the perfect image. I was interested in emotions and how I can weave a series of pictures together to communicate something deeper. And for most of my life, I was way more comfortable behind the lens than in front of it. And then I became a mum, and my daughter got ill, and that pulled me into a completely different line of work, as it often does when you become a mama. I went into healing work. I started with nutrition and later explored mindset work, energy work, and eventually body-based approaches. And in many ways, this was not new to me. It was more of a return to what I had grown up around, because I grew up around a whole family of psychotherapists. My grandmother was the founder of a pioneering body-based approach to psychotherapy. And my mother spent decades teaching and developing that work alongside her. And yet, as the world moved online, I watched something quite strange happen. People with a fraction of her experience were building audiences and creating opportunities and becoming recognized voices in that field, while my mother's work was becoming harder and harder to find. And what affected me most wasn't the recognition. It was watching a woman who had dedicated her life to helping people approach her later years with very little choices. She was still traveling, teaching, still working incredibly hard, and she was approaching being 80 years old. And it's not that she didn't want to keep teaching, but it would be nice to have a choice. And something about that just felt deeply wrong to me. So I decided to bring her work online. I had previously tried to promote myself and my services as a practitioner online, and it felt so tight. I had so many resistances. The times I'd been successful at promoting retreats online was when it wasn't personal to me. And this seemed to be the same because it wasn't for me. I had no resistances. There was no overthinking or fear or paralysis. I was just behind the scene, creating content, building systems, helping someone else's work reach more people. And there was no emotional charge around it. And then people started asking me for help: therapists, facilitators, healers, holistic business owners, and all of them who were brilliant at what they did, but they struggled to put it into words and put it online. And eventually, I realized that I had to put myself in front of the camera if I was going to start teaching visibility, because I couldn't be telling them to do something that I myself was scared of doing. So suddenly I found myself confronted with being in front of the lens. I genuinely thought I'd done so much healing work before then, years of self-development, years of looking at my own patterns. But it seemed like the camera found every single place inside of me that was still not comfortable in my own skin. I could not stand the sound of my voice. Watching myself back felt so uncomfortable. It would make me, I would go online and record, and then sometimes it would stop me from showing up again for months. I became aware of every expression, every mannerism, the internal thoughts I had about my body. And what I've eventually understood is that being seen is one of the few places left where we are repeatedly confronted with ourselves, and not the version we imagine, not the potential that we have in our minds, the actual physical version, our face, our voice, our flaws, the things we've accepted, the things we haven't. And that discovery became the foundation of everything I teach today. So if we go back to the beginning of social media, and this might reveal my age, but essentially it started as connection. I remember moving to a different country after college, and it was a great way to keep in touch with friends and family, especially since we didn't have phones like we do today. And that was the whole point of it. And then Instagram arrived, and it was originally for photographers. They had these cool filters that made all the photos look analog. And with my background, I loved it. And then it shifted. It shifted to this aesthetic era. Perfect feeds, perfect bodies, perfect lives. Everyone performing a version of themselves that looked completely perfect to others, but were actually completely fake. And we saw influencers of the time come out later and speak of those fake lives being the most unhealthy time of their lives, which made the pendulum swing completely the other direction. And authenticity was now where it was at. Be real, be vulnerable, show your behind the scenes. And for a while, it felt really great. And that's kind of when I hopped back on, because I was like, yeah, that's for me. I'm going to ride this social media train. But now even authenticity has started to feel performative, because it's like vulnerability almost became the branding. The word is everywhere, and it started to lose its meaning, and people are exhausted again. Everywhere you look, it's be authentic, but still hook better, faster, algorithm this, constant output. And I hear this all the time. Being committed to my work means having to be on all the time, and it doesn't. The information is conflicting. It's like be relatable but aspirational, professional but authentic, polished but raw, personal but not too personal. The pressure to always be performing, always producing, always visible in a way that feels completely disconnected from how you actually want to work. So you freeze. And it's not because you lack discipline. And it's definitely not because you're not an online person. It's because your nervous system is completely overwhelmed. And what makes this even harder is that you're probably deeply thoughtful. You care about what you say. You have a lot of integrity. You're not willing to manipulate people or manufacture emotion for the algorithm, which means you overthink everything. And then you watch louder people who are better at self-promotion, posting constantly with absolute certainty, while you're sitting there rewriting the same caption several times. And eventually you start making it mean something about yourself, like, I'm inconsistent, I'm not disciplined, maybe I'm just not good at this. And I want to challenge that story, because I don't think social media is the real problem here. And I don't think being seen is the real problem either. I think somewhere along the line, we confuse showing up with performing. And once those two things become the same in our minds, everything becomes much harder than it needs to be. Performance asks, how do I get people to look at me? And showing up asks, how do I help the right people find me? Performance is exhausting. Showing up is actually being of service. You know, while performance is asking you to become someone else, showing up and expression asks you to become more of yourself. And if you've spent years believing that being seen means becoming louder, more polished, more performative, of course you're exhausted. because you've been trying to build a business while simultaneously trying to become someone you're not. Yes, at some point we do need to take the messy action and we do need to press publish. But confidence rarely comes before the action, it comes after it. So there's a difference between taking action from a place of self-trust and taking action while your entire system is in resistance. And that difference is what this series is about. Most people assume visibility is about attention, more followers, more reach, more people watching, more vanity metrics. But attention and being found are not the same thing. Attention says, hey, look at me. Being found says, here I am. You're probably not trying to become famous or an influencer. What you want is for the right people to find you, the people who need your work, the people who need your support, the people who have been searching for exactly what you have spent years learning, embodying, and practicing with your clients already. The thing is, most people don't sit at home thinking, I need a healer, I need a nervous system coach. They don't know that yet. What they know is that something's not working, they're in pain, something feels stuck, and they're searching for relief. Often they don't even fully understand the problem that they're experiencing. And meanwhile, there's somebody on the other side of that problem, somebody with years of experience, years of learning, years of genuine care, somebody who could genuinely help, and the two never meet. And it's not because the work is not valuable or because the practitioner is not skilled, but because the bridge was never built. And I think there's something deeply sad about that, the transformation that never takes place, the conversation that never happens, the healing that never begins. And it's not because it wasn't possible, but because the person who could have helped stayed hidden. So I don't see visibility as attention. I see it as connection. I see it as service, as creating the possibility for the right people to find the work that might genuinely change something for them. This is where I want to introduce something I call sovereign visibility, because sovereign visibility is not about becoming louder or more performative or chasing trends. It's about remaining connected to yourself while allowing yourself to be seen. It's stepping into your truth and expressing yourself from a heart-centered place. So it doesn't come from a place of needing validation or needing everybody to agree with you, but it's because your work matters, because your voice matters, because there are people who will genuinely benefit from what you have to offer, and because hiding helps nobody, including you. So maybe being seen was never about becoming someone else. Maybe it's simply the bridge between the people who need help and the people who can help them. And if that's true, then the real question is not, how do I get more people to notice me? The real question is, what is stopping me from allowing myself to be found? Because if showing up is service, if expression is not performance, then why does it still feel so uncomfortable? Why do intelligent, deeply skilled, genuinely caring people continue to freeze, overthink, or disappear? That's exactly what we're going to explore in the next episode, because most struggles around showing up online are not a social media problem at all. They're a protective pattern. And until we understand them, we will keep confusing protection with procrastination.